I'll try to cut some of this stuff out. Just start off, a little bit about this. The timeline for ours started about 2004. I moved out from Seattle to go to grad school. Was that Kyle Capizzi? This is Prairie Crossing. I'll talk a little bit about the context and setting of what we're doing. This is a span between 2004 and now, so about a 4-year span that I'll try to cover briefly. The main thing was that we had some opportunities because of the context and setting we were in, and what I'd like to get out of this is a bit of thinking about the environment you're in and what you can do with that. Talk a little bit about the formation, building the base, where we decided to finally go beyond, look, we can make this stuff, and a little bit about what's going on now. So Prairie Crossing developed actually as a reaction to what was going to be one of the largest, the most dense developments in Lake County, which is northern county in Illinois. The idea was to change development trend to a conservation development. Pardon the oxymoron there. It's really now critically acclaimed, gotten all kinds of reports, and what they did was they preserved an organic farm, or they preserved a farm and turned it organic. There's about 80 acres of organic land now. Serves 3 purposes. I'll talk a little bit about 2 of them. The third one is actually a farm incubator project, basically growing farmers. The tiers of the community that really made this possible were the Learning Farm, which can be anything my wife runs, Sandhill Organics, which is a commercial organic farm, and some community involvement, some major community involvement. The Learning Farm does farm-based education right there. There are 2 schools that it serves, a K-8 charter school, which has an environmental charter, and also the Montessori adolescent program. It's one of the few Montessori schools that actually has a farm to work on. That's part of Maria Montessori's teachings. That's Nicole with one of her chickens. This is a dedicated education staff, and the school system brings their kids there to learn. So we wanted to have some educational opportunities to teach kids, not just about where their food comes from, but a little bit about sustainability in general. So I added the biodiesel component to that. Turns out that we end up attracting a lot more people, some adults that want to do biodiesel as well. So Sandhill Organics, that second tier of the community, Schaefer family have a 30-acre plot. The 21 of that is in cultivation right now. They were running B20 that they were just buying from the ag co-op, and they wanted to up that. Matt Schaefer, the farmer, bought himself a 300D and said, "Oh, what the heck? We'll do some biodiesel with this little project that Kyle's putting together." And there was a plan for having biodiesel trucks. It is a truck farm. They go into the Oak Park Farmers Market in Chicago, so that's about a 40-mile drive, 80-mile round trip. And then the community involvement came because there was a member of the Prairie Crossing community that wrote a letter to the developers called the Biodiesel Opportunity. And that was what kind of started this whole thing off. They were going to get some families together. A couple people already owned Volkswagen GTIs. One guy had a truck. They said, "Okay, let's do this." And they said, "Okay, we're going to buy Fuelmeister and teach people how to use it. And we're just going to do this somewhere in the community." They didn't know where yet. They weren't sure. So I had started learning about biodiesel and said, "Okay, why don't we do this right? Let's find out what else we can do." So 4 member families started in 2004, 2005, 2 resident families, and then the Schaefers and myself and Nicole. So the new plan was to actually set up an educational demonstration and also have something that would fuel a majority of the farm equipment provide an opportunity to possibly apply for grants and do something bigger later. So that Biodiesel Opportunity letter came out. We said there is an opportunity for community building with this as well. And again, this was early stages. We got all heady and got excited about bringing people up from Chicago. And so we did a processor build day and taught a whole bunch of people how to build an apple seed. Actually got a bunch of plumbers to come in, and we had a corn crib that you saw in that first picture that we decided, okay, we're going to just start doing community education on this. We did some demonstrations. The charter school has a culminating project requirement that actually one of the options to do a culminating project was to do biodiesel related work as well. So some of the kids in the 8th grade were working with us the first year as well. And when we proposed all of this, the project group included the community members that wanted to be included. One other member who didn't even have a diesel yet went out for the 5-day class in Iowa. There were some very big advocates to do this. We started doing oil collection. We have the typical oil collection letter that we drafted and worked on for a while. It happens that before my wife got into the whole farming thing, she happened to be an English major, so she edited and worked through all of this. And we use these 35-pound cubes, of course, the typical ones that we all love to hate, but they are convenient as our initial oil collecting. And we were getting all this for free, and we were pretty excited about it. So in 2005, we started deciding as a group what we really could do. And I really want to encourage, if you are forming a group, find out how you play together. Find out what you do, who wants to do what, who can best do that. So what is important to each member? Some people have talked about conservation principles. Some people have talked about making money. You have to gather from your group what the reason you're doing it for. And how big should it get is another interesting question that Steve kind of addressed a little bit as well. That there has to be sometimes a limit based on your locations, and for us, it seems that we're getting around our limit at about 10 now, 9, 10 members. We may expand if we decide to increase that. But that was a question. At the beginning, we started talking about the limits rather than goals, and I would encourage, along with that conversation, of what's important to each member, starting with a question of goals. So we did our build day. There's our beat-down water heater, 66-gallon processor. We generally were processing about 40 gallon batches.
Do you want us to hold questions?
No. If there are some questions, I'm sorry, feel free. I'm just trying to cruise through this so we do have time, but go ahead.
Do you have a current requirement of so many hours per week per member?
Yeah, and I will talk about that. I'll talk about some of the requirements.
And enforcement.
Huh?
And enforcing it.
Shame is a good one, but no. Enforcement involves how much you can put into your tank. There's no point in we don't need to do any more enforcement than that. And one thing that was really exciting about this time was getting people involved by just being there to see the project start. And I think it is critical for members to buy in, to really think this idea is a good one. Obviously now that's a little different. We have people that say, oh, I can save $4 a gallon by doing this? Okay. That wasn't the case in 2005. 2006, we did some more education. I actually started talking to Mark again about coming out to do another class. We actually did that up in Milwaukee in 2007 as part of the Milwaukee Biodiesel Co-op, which could be a whole other presentation, fun. But this is where we first started experiencing some of our growing pains. And I don't want to sugarcoat that there were times when we thought we were going to disband this, but we would work through most of that. We had kind of a small catchment area. I was living in the northern suburbs at the time. There weren't as many choices for restaurants that weren't really killing their oil. A lot of stuff was titrating 10, 15. So we started looking at who are the best places we can go to. These restaurants that were locked into contracts, about this time there were some folks starting to do contracts for over a year. They were trying to sign people in for over a year. And we just said, okay, we aren't going to collect too much oil because we were concerned about that extra oil on the farm. And so we had some times where we couldn't brew because of that. The phone tree problem, we started to run into people not showing up, and that enforcement of not getting fuel in your tank wasn't working because we weren't making enough fuel anyway. So people started to drop off, and we weren't getting enough time warning that someone wasn't going to be there. So we implemented a different system. Individual processing, obviously there's a major safety concern with that, and there's also a concern for the farm because this is a working organic farm. There's a lot going on, and if that grain bin blows up, their primary business is in a lot worse shape than our little biodiesel operation. So we implemented some safety things as well. Hello? There we go. So some of the solutions. We addressed that with a private Yahoo group. I actually had the Yahoo group running, but we weren't using calendaring functions with it. So we have now this archival record, which is very useful. If we have time, I'll pull up a Yahoo group if people haven't done it, and also Google Calendar, which we implemented later. Files area on there, so I can actually put information on for new members. It provides a lot of opportunity for me to free myself up from answering a lot of questions and say, okay, read this and this and this and come back to me with some questions. Members list with contact information, so if a person doesn't have the information they need, they didn't have the phone tree, they didn't have whatever, they can log in. This assumes that everybody has internet connections. We do have some members that don't, so that can be problematic. And then we've got just a very easy mass email system with that, and I encourage you, if you're trying to organize a group, these private Yahoo groups, they're not available to the public. You can set them up so they're private. Everyone has to log in, and that information isn't available to the public. So it's great. Oil collection goal setting, we started talking about how much we wanted to brew and then basing that on that. Just simple planning measures that really weren't happening initially. So new members identified based on their ability to collect oil and also their willingness to collect that oil. And also, whenever a new person comes in, we ask them to make some estimates of their consumption. How much of this stuff do you think you really would use? How much do you want to? And the third thing, we paired processing. So folks were doing at least 2 people when we're processing. Usually 3 were hanging out. A 4th one to talk or take pictures.
Do all members work?
Yes. We have been considering other options with that because we do have some people that said, you know, I'd like to dump a bunch of money into this. Money isn't the problem for us. It's definitely getting the work done, getting it done in an efficient manner. And I'll talk a little bit about what we've decided to do for that.
Are all members required to source oil?
We have not required everyone to source oil because we haven't had problems getting oil now. If we start running into problems getting oil, we will require that folks source oil. If they are going to be using more than their allotted amount, we are definitely requiring that people are using oil, or collecting oil, replacing oil. And you know, typical lab notebook type of approach. We were doing also for a while, we were asking everyone to run, regardless of if they actually did it at the time they made the process, was enter everything into the Biodiesel-O-Matic Excel spreadsheet, and we were posting all those Excel spreadsheets on the Yahoo group so that we had a record through that as well, and we could track cost or estimated cost at least. And that provided an electronic form. I can go back later, tabulate all that into, even if I want to use QuickBooks or something, and do it upright, but not necessary yet. So we've got at least some digital information. Downstream processing, that was a big one as well. Wastewater treatment, we actually did talk to our wastewater folks, and they said, down this here, great, biodiesel big enough, we're not too worried about it. I gave them some samples at one point. They really didn't seem to show a lot of concern. Now, if I'm dumping my wash of 22 gallons down, it's not a big deal. But we're going to readdress this with the big processor, which I'll talk about in a bit. Glycerin, we did use KOH for the reason of composting. MOSA's the Midwest Organic certification. Matt is being very conservative about this, does not want to add this glycerin to compost until he's got data. And we're doing a small project to look at the compost and see. And I'd love to talk to you a little more, Steve, about that. The junk oil, we have some rendering bins that we can return it to. It's a hassle transporting back and forth, but you're going out to pick up oil anyway from some sources. We have some renderer bins that are close by. We can drop into those. And cubies, once again, you've got those to deal with. We've got a dumpster that we can throw them into if they're really bad. We've been trying to recycle them, crush them down, get them to where they're recyclable. One person recently, I can't remember who, Mark was telling me about cutting the tops off and sliding them in and stacking them together like cups, and they seem to store pretty well that way. We're going to continue to play with that. I don't think we're ever going to get out of cubies for some of our sources. So we have to manage the cubies regardless of how big we go. And finally, I'll just do a little bit of beyond. Gee whiz, we can do this. This is what we started out with. This was the 66-gallon apple seed. We actually put some inline settling tanks. This was just a gravity feed into a wash tank. That was our stage 1 washing system. That white hose going in was leading to a shower head style one. We've since added a faucet nozzle and a timer because we overflowed once, and that was enough. 40 gallons of biodiesel on the floor was enough to convince us to put a timer in. But originally this was educationally driven, but we started to say, well, we can make a lot of fuel here, why not? So we had waste stream questions. We had concerns about oil processing upgrades, really doing this in a little bigger way. So we also had some finance questions, and it started out that I was financing this as well as the Milwaukee Co-op, and didn't want to do that anymore. So we had a dwindling capital fund because we had originally collected $350 from each of our members. And so we did a financing round. We said, why not? Why not do financing? We pulled all of our members in and said, here's what we want to build. We want to make a bigger processor, and here's what it's going to take. So I ended up collecting $450 per member, which was a vesting program for a capital fund, and $100 for a usables fund, which was managed by longtime member Roy Newman. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Did you mention a legal entity or structure?
No.
So it's a club.
It is.
Okay.
Yep.
So what assurances do the members have that their money isn't going to go to Kiwanis?
They don't. They have none. But the ROI is about 3 months right now, if that. So, a lot of these people are willing to take the risk. The other assurance that they get, they don't get to pay in right away. We have people coming out to the farm to see if they play well with the group, if they work, they're interested enough, and then we say you can pay $450 and vest so you can get access to fuel. we ran into some problems with one member and decided to do that first because it was a lot of promises. A guy that was a welder that said, you know, I'll love to build you guys some tanks, and it never happened. And he had all of our tanks to make our big processor for a month and a half. I finally had to, you know, show up at his door and say, I need some tanks back. But he had never paid in. He had nothing to lose. So there is that social contract, but that's all.
Sorry, you mentioned you've already done sort of ROI estimate. Did you actually, when you do a finance service, did you do a business plan?
No. It's just, I mean, at the capacity even we are now, return on investment is so quick, it's ridiculous. I mean, when you're asking somebody to slap down $500, which is 2 fill-ups of their F-350.
Well, you only call it 10 members too, so $5 grand?
Yeah. Yes. And we haven't even collected everything from everybody. I've allowed a few people to pay in slowly because they just can't afford that. Yeah, Robert.
Yeah, maybe I'd like to add a commentary, or I can wait until after you finish your slides.
Fine.
I guess the point, it's just a commentary, maybe controversial, but, and it has to do maybe with your last couple of slides, with co-ops, I think from what I'm hearing in general, and especially with your 501c3 tax exempt status as a means to sustain the co-op. I think something that's very fundamental to me is the fact that there is a business side to it. And unless that's taken very, very seriously in the whole process of sorting out the sustainability of what you want to do with the co-ops, how you're going to do it, how it's going to affect you, the environmental issues, we're doomed for failures. I sit on a couple of nonprofit boards, social service nonprofit boards, and even with that, one of my biggest challenges, and I think the biggest benefit that I provide them, is the fact that if there is no funding, there is no mission. And that's usually a golden rule for a good, profitable, sustainable nonprofit. So I just say that because Cal mentioned his ROI, but if we don't go into this being fiscally responsible, number one, about what we're doing, there are going to be a number of failures and there are going to be a number of major hurdles that it's going to take longer to make this sustainable.
And to add on to that, I looked at this as a way to avoid having one of the fabulous failures, and we've got some examples of that, that people have talked about that had great ideas, but I wanted to make sure that one, I wasn't financing it, and two, the members were felt responsible to it. So, yes, somebody.
I just want to point out that the theme is sustainability, and we've got to have economic sustainability.
Yes.
Or it's going to perish.
Exactly. There is, and there are things that spin off of these co-ops often that make people money too. It may not be the co-op entity itself, but I'll talk about a few of those. First, we had to also get our planning together and really, put the house in order. I use a Google Doc for that. If anyone has questions about Google Docs, it was really a godsend for me because I was trying to run around and tell people what to do, how to actually make fuel, what our next planning was. I'm not there this weekend, but there are people building some of our equipment. If I have a moment, I'll pull one up and show you. We did shift scheduling via the calendar. We started thinking about what our whole supply chain was, doing an analysis of not just our oil, but our methanol, where our KOH was coming from, started looking at what the costs to each individual member that were doing those things. And we haven't incorporated those into the cost of making the fuel yet, but it is covered relatively well by the dollar a gallon that we're putting in for each member's expenses. We use a brewmaster model. It's already been talked about a little bit. Training at each stage of the process. We are going to have a thing where a person signs off that they understand each aspect of it, just to, again, have that responsibility there. I'm actually saying I know this. Some people are more likely to sign a document, but a lot of people, if you ask them to say, you know, I really have knowledge about this, I'm going to sign this, they take it a little more seriously. And then finally, large processor build. Just really quickly, did continue that educational trend. We did growing out of the apple seed the 30th of May, 30th and the 1st of June. This brought people out of the woodwork. People that said, oh, these guys, I guess they kind of know what they're doing. So we want to get in on this. And we said, we want to build a bigger processor and we want to collect funds. So that's where that economic model, having people invest, came from. And we wanted to really put a spotlight on the safety and waste management part of this, because when you go up, obviously, from a 40-gallon processor up to 300, is what we're doing, you've got a whole host of potential problems, and hopefully we're heading those off. 3,000 plus gallons is what the member estimate need was, so we started working on that, working our way backward.
That's a month?
No, I'm sorry, that's 3,000 plus for the brewing season, and we have capacity to do probably twice that, depending on member participation. And I wanted another model of processor. Paul at Murphy's Machines is selling his MM500 for $750 or something, and selling the plans for it, which are phenomenal, by the way. But the other thing that's available out there are these 275-gallon oil tanks. And so we started looking at welding those end to end, building in a few extra ports to those that are already there. Provides a nice stack of ports that are already in there when you weld them like that. So we decided to do that. Added 3 ports on the bottom, 1-inch NPTs for doing electric heating or running alternate heating with fluid through. We've got one guy that's a heated floor guy, and he's willing to do that. 1-inch port for the top mounted for a float switch for safety, and 1 and 2-inch fill and drain ports for some versatility, how we want to move things back and forth. Oil processing first. This is what our oil processing looked like. Kind of terrible, kind of similar to what some people that are dealing in larger quantities are experiencing. And so we had our totes there, but we added some gravity filtration and settling to this by combining totes. And I don't know if people will be able to see this. I don't know if you can read all of this, but initially this was my initial drawing of it, using a 400 micron initial screen, 200 micron screens through it. This was very basic drawings. These are 3 IBCs in a row. Well, what we ended up doing was stacking an IBC and moving this initial IBC up high, because it would move everything through. This is just based on a hydraulic push, so anything going in here, this didn't provide enough, so we stacked them and have the first tote up here, which flows down into this one after an overflow, and then the third one is filled through overflow as well. And from that one, we pump into a 1,000-gallon rolling ag tank.
So you're a seasonal co-op?
We are currently a seasonal co-op, but we can also move this indoors. We got a huge shop if need be. And this is currently the first season that we're using this one. So here's some pictures just to get you a sense of hoses and things that go all over the place. This is for dealing with cubies. A 55-gallon drum cut off with filtration. That actually gets pumped into the top now, because who wants to carry cubies up to the top? This is our stacked cubes with just a Harbor Freight pump, pumping up into actually 1-inch PVC right now. We had the unfortunate design flaw from the standpoint of backfilling. We actually had some back siphoning initially, so you have to build a check valve into that system. For our wash, in addition to a big processor, you got to have a big wash. So we actually did a 3-stack of 55-gallon drums as an experiment with Mark over the weekend for the class, and I bought some Boss Buck cones, the formed cones, just to make it possible for people to very quickly put together a wash tank, because forming the cone is the hardest part of the whole thing if you're using a cone bottom metal tank. That has a 1-inch NPT port built in, and each one of these ports on the side is a sample port, so we can sample from anywhere in the mix, so long as we have a ladder. The original design was 120-gallon towers. Now they're 170 or so gallons. The initial one is a mist head, and we can pump for recirculation into the second one, and then a bubble and a bubble wash and drying in the third. We have 2 containers. These are for retaining the the third and fourth wash, and that gets used in the first wash to minimize the amount of water we use. We're in a place where we don't have to worry about our water use as much, but we just wanted to build that in to minimize it. Any questions?
In your washes, how much water do you use per volume of biodiesel?
The initial one, we were using 66 gallons for about 40 gallons of biodiesel. We've reduced that to, let me do the math real quick, 88 for 150 gallons.
Would you be willing to share those letters that you developed for community?
Yeah, they're actually based off of the letter that's on the Collaborative Biodiesel tutorial. If none of you have seen the Collaborative Biodiesel tutorial, biodieselcommunity.org, that's the first kind of the peer review, kind of in this same model of having some peer review. And there is a biodiesel collection, or an oil collection letter on there. You can begin a model off of. Yeah.
Do you have members sign a liability release of any sort?
No, and actually, Matt has asked that we do that because we are on his land.
We have one.
Do you?
It's for fuel, but
Yeah.
I'd be happy to share it with you.
Yeah, as far as taking the risk, holding the risk, each member, I can show you our member agreement. We have something in the member agreement about taking on risk for fuel, but not in terms of liability around the farm.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot.